He's been called the Jimi Hendrix of violin. We're up to our entire interview with new Kansas member Joe Denenzone on Rock History Book. In 2023, violinist David Ragsdale announced that he was leaving the band Kansas for personal reasons. And in came the leader of a band called Stratosferious, Joe Denenzone, an accomplished violinist renowned for his amazing technique and performances. An amazing violinist who's been called the Jimi Hendrix of the violin. Joe is from a very classical family. They were all musicians. And as a boy, he studied classical piano and violin. In '79, when they immigrated from St. Petersburg to the USA, he got into rock and jazz. Picked up a lot of instruments, actually, bass and guitar, and was plugging away at a lot of rock and jazz bands. But his instrument of choice, and the cream always rises, there's always an instrument, right? Was the violin. His band Stratosferious has melded into different styles, eventually being called a prog band, which is probably where Kansas heard him play. Technically, he is an amazing player. How did the Kansas thing happen?
Had known Tom Brislin, their keyboard player from the Jersey music scene. The progressive rock world in Jersey is kind of a small community of people, and a lot of the same musicians, a lot of the same fans. So, I've seen him play, and he'd seen my band. And when the time came for them to get what do you call them, understudies for each guy in the band, he recommended me for violin because he knew me as kind of the prog violin guy. And they had all had COVID at one point or another. They didn't want to have to cancel any more shows and lose money. And they made a rule that everyone has to have a backup person to be able to step in. And then I got the call in February. I started learning the music for the 50th anniversary tour. But David Ragsdale, who I have deep respect for, who's been in the band for a long time, was still touring with them. But there were some personal issues, some health issues with him, and they weren't sure if he could continue touring. So I was it was on and off, just be ready, but everything is cool.
So he's finished now with the band. He's moving on, doing his thing.
As far as I know, it's health related, and
okay. That's
as far as I can say. So
cool.
It was a very difficult decision for them to make because he had been with them for such a long time. And I wish him well, and I have nothing but deep respect for him. And
what was the thing that's made you pick up an instrument?
I come from a family of musicians, classical musicians. Actually, my father just retired after 44 years with the Cleveland Orchestra. And my mother's a concert pianist and a teacher, and they run a music school out of their house. So I was born into it. But it was kind of understood that I'd followed my father's footsteps in playing in an orchestra, and I rebelled and kind of did my own thing. But I studied violin since I was 6. I'm classically trained, but I got really into, rock, jazz, and other kinds of music and improvisation. And I wanted to be more creative, and I felt classical music was a little stifling in that regard. Yeah. And I also loved a lot of different kinds of music, and a lot of people in the classical world I found had, as much as I love classical music, a lot of people in that world have tunnel vision, and they're kind of oblivious to a lot of other things, and sometimes look down on a lot of other things. And I didn't like that, So that kind of set me on my way. Part of it, the other thing was, we came from Russia. We were immigrants, and I didn't speak English when I was a little kid, and I wanted to kind of connect with people, and I felt that rock music was just vibrated with people more. Wow. So I grew up in Ohio. I grew up in Cleveland, and culturally, I'm very much kind of a Midwestern guy.
Parents still around?
Yeah, they live in Cleveland.
How do they look at your career now?
They're huge supporters of mine, cheering me on. They always supported my interests and passions. I think it took at some point they maybe thought I would turn around and become a classical musician, but when they realized how serious and passionate I was about what I did, they kind of accepted it, and they're so supportive. Just
the band's been around for a while, right?
Yeah, this was kind of my brainchild. I started the band in the early 2000s when I came to New York. I recorded a CD before I moved to New York with local classical musicians, and it was more of a Jean-Luc Ponty-esque kind of instrumental fusion thing. And I wanted to find musicians to play that stuff live. And I was shopping it around to different clubs, and it kind of morphed. I started writing more vocal stuff, you know, combined with the fusion instrumental stuff, and it morphed into what became Stratosferious. It was just because I was really interested in exploring the the pushing the boundaries of the electric violin. I had a certain sound in my head. I couldn't wait around and until someone hired me to do it. I had to kind of create my own world. So it came from that desire and just the love of performing and writing music and finding like-minded people to do it, which is not always easy.
The guys that you looked up to in the early days.
Well, for violin, obviously Jean-Luc Ponty is like the father or the grandfather of electric violin. Jerry Goodman had a huge influence on me because he played gritty. He didn't play perfect. He had this rock and roll kind of vibe to his playing that so many string players are obsessed with everything being perfect and kind of sterile, in my opinion. He just had this wild abandon that spoke to me, and I hadn't heard anyone play that way when I heard him with Mahavishnu. Sugarcane Harris, who played with Zappa in the 60s, just the bluesiest, grittiest violin playing. And I was influenced by a lot of guitar players because I play guitar too. In Kansas, I play guitar as well. Like Steve Vai, Nuno Bettencourt, obviously Eddie Van Halen, Jimi Hendrix, Jimmy Page. I think they all influenced my violin playing as much as my guitar playing.
Let's talk about some tunes on the record Release. Tell me about that tune.
That's an old one. I wrote that back in 2005, but we didn't release it till 2012. We kind of toured with it and played it. The theme of it is kind of about everything in my life that I relentlessly pursued seemed to elude me. Things kind of found me, and it's kind of deals with riding a wave of life and trusting the wave, to bring you to shore, and not being. Sometimes when you let go, then all the good things happen. If that kind of makes sense. So yeah, it's a very philosophical song and still rings true. And we still play it, and it's one of those that had stood the test of time in our set list.
One of my favorites is the next song, Imposter. That's the song that made me stop and go, oh, that's the one where I went, the violin, it's that tune. I played that over and over again. What can you tell me about that one?
But we released it as a single in 2019, but it's actually, we just finished mixing our next studio album. That's going to be, might be the title track. We're going to re-release it and remaster it, and it's going to be on the album. That's the first song we recorded with Bill Hubauer, the keyboardist, who is kind of the fifth member of the band, keyboardist with Neil Morse. And he adds a great flavor to it. And that's actually the song that helped get me the gig with Kansas. That's the video they saw that they liked, and it kind of sounds very Kansas inspired, and it deals with imposter syndrome, and it's got some political overtones to it, and it's a very proggy and fun song to play.
Have you ever had that, like that imposter, going back to that thing of going, wow, this has turned out pretty good, this career of mine?
I got to tell you, I suffered from, we all have. I mean, I suffered from imposter syndrome many times in my life. And people who I consider very successful have confessed to me in private that they experience it as well. The last people you would think feel that way, but I've been at it for a long, long time. And when the opportunities presented themselves this year, I felt ready, and I felt like I paid my dues, man. I earned this. I scratched and clawed for it. So, I wake up every morning and I say to myself, yeah, I belong here, and I shouldn't second guess anything. And so everything happens for a reason. Roads will lead you to a certain place. So
Frame by Frame, real rocker. Love that tune. Another one of my favorite songs. What can you tell me about that one?
I'm a huge King Crimson fan and Adrian Belew fan, both as a guitarist and a singer. And his voice is in my range. It's very easy to sing songs that he writes. And that song always spoke to me. And we started messing with it a while back with Stratosferious. Once in a while, we'll do a cover, that we feel kind of fits us. And we decided to record it. It was also, I hadn't heard anybody play it on the violin and play Robert Fripp's fast ostinato part on the fiddle, which works really well, I think. So I thought it would be fun to present the song that way and, kind of reframe it, no pun intended. And I actually, we have a studio version we released, but I like the live version better personally. I think it's more raw. You know what pisses me off, like with the streaming services, younger generations miss out on the album experience. People just listen to bits. We're in the singles. We're like in the 50s. We're in the singles era again. And you can appreciate one song on its own, but when you listen to a great record that the artist really labored over and thought about sequencing and telling a story, it's like watching a movie and just seeing one scene from a movie. So what? You want that journey, that story. And it also pisses me off that streaming services like Spotify, when you press play, it just automatically sets the album to random and will play not necessarily from the beginning. And I wish we could change that. I wish we could go back to album-oriented, mentality and all that stuff.
When you were learning the Kansas songs, and again, the audience forgets sometimes when you're learning songs, you can't just go, yeah, I know that one. No, it doesn't work that way.
No, not at all. I mean, things that I had covered, like Even Dust in the Wind, Point of No Return, I thought I was playing it right. But when you study the isolated tracks and do the deep dive, you're realizing how it's really done. And then you hear tribute bands doing it wrong, So it was a lot of transcribing, a lot of going back and forth with Tom, who's the musical director, and him kind of correcting me here and there. And we're still always finding little details to fix,
Little nuances.
Yeah, there's a lot of little Easter eggs in that music, little nuances and notes. And so it's fascinating. And also the music is so complex. It's a never ending rabbit hole,
How long did it take you?
I was first I spent 2 weeks writing everything out because nothing was written out. I work that way. I like transcribing things. And that way, if I'm even not with my violin, I can put it into my phone and look at the music and memorize it that way. I was actually doing that. And then just practicing and memorizing song by song over 2 months. So by the time May rolled around, I had a pretty good grasp on the material.
With a background of classical music, would quite honest come towards notation quite honestly anyway? They would, because notation would be a big part of their past because they have to do it the way they have to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. But the difference is that a lot of classical musicians are so used to having everything notated to them that if somebody doesn't have it written out, they sometimes get angry about it and don't, this is so unprofessional, this is far below me. I'm not supposed to be transcribing and doing this and doing that. But when you play it, when you're in the world of rock and pop music and hip hop and other styles outside of the realm, most of the people you encounter don't read music or maybe learn music a different way, and that doesn't make them bad musicians. You just have to learn to inhabit those worlds and accept them on their own terms. So I was aware that I might probably have to learn it that way by ear or transcribing, and that's fine. Or be prepared to like learn something on one instrument and then they'll change their minds and want you to play it on guitar instead of violin or sing a different part or just be flexible.
I like Climbing. Gorgeous song. What can you tell me about that one?
That one it's kind of like about the frustrations of trying to make it as a musician or as an artist, and kind of the climb, just all the stuff you have to deal with, and going home for family gatherings and people asking, what are you doing with your life, kind of thing, and not understanding. It's got those overtones, people can relate to. It's kind of a country ballad, and it's not so proggy. It was co-written with my old guitarist, Mac Price from Texas. So he created kind of that country vibe. And I added that proggy middle part where I solo. And a lot of times during that song, I'll go out into the audience and serenade them, which I like to do.
I like Storm Surge as well. So that was about COVID.
It was not just COVID. It was kind of everything that was going on at that time,
Yeah.
including the Black Lives Matter movement and COVID and just that it was a very tumultuous time and people were dealing with a lot of inner turmoil and um, it's kind of and I remember I had these anxiety dreams where I was imagining big waves and angry stormy seas and it was a recurring dream I would have, and I would try to figure out what it means. So it ties into that feeling of not being stable, not knowing the future, and the feeling that a lot of people were experiencing at that time. The thing about that was it was inspired by a piano etude by Friedrich Burgmüller that my son was practicing from the 1800s. So it was very fast. So I liked the chords and I slowed them down. I borrowed the chords from that etude, and then we wrote lyrics and made it a rock power ballad. If you want to be a musician, it's got to be like I absolutely cannot live without it. Like it's like food or air for me. If it's anything less than that, you could, make it a side hustle, and do something else.
You mentioned dreams. You pay attention to your dreams?
I have an electric violin concerto that I hope to release. It's a 30-minute piece of music with orchestra. I'm going to start working on it in the next year or two, recording it, but it's called Dream Diary, and it kind of is inspired by like a fictional psychedelic dream in 4 movements.
Wow.
And I remember like when Steve Vai wrote Passion and Warfare, it was inspired by a dream journal that he had. So, that theme is in my music.
You seem like a deep guy. I think it seemed like you thought about this. Where do you think people go when they die?
I have no idea. I want to believe there's an afterlife or we get reincarnated. I have a relative who lives in Baltimore and she was in Toledo in Spain. And all of a sudden she saw a building and she said, I lived here. I remember this building. I went to school. I walked down the street. I remember everything. And she had this moment, which is trippy, So yeah. I am of the philosophy that there's a whole other realm out there that we are not aware of. I'm just kind of open to whatever it is, but we'll find out when we get there,
One foot in the next world.
Oh my God.
Whoa.
Well, so that album, The Next World, 2012, was dedicated to the memory of Bob Bowen. He was our bass player who got hit by a truck in 2010 and died. He played on one track on that album and he played on Headspace and my jazz record. And the cover of that album was his drawing. And the title was The Next World, which is a reference to him passing on. But the One Foot in the Next World was a political kind of song criticizing evangelicals, actually. And it was during the Bush era it was written, so it was where my head was at. But again, kind of a cryptic song,
The Prism, to me, that I like the sense of theater in song. It's grand. I just love that too. What can you tell me about that one?
That one I was driving back from the studio and the album was done. All of a sudden, that whole song popped into my head, fully formulated. Sometimes that happens, which is crazy. It's like someone plants it in your brain and it's already there, like it's always been there. So that just kind of wrote itself. It's definitely got a Kashmir, Led Zeppelin kind of influence, for sure. It's very epic, grandiose, and another one we love to play. That one doesn't get old for us.
What's the thing that what surprised you the most about being in Kansas?
They're the most punctual band I've ever been in. If
Really?
if the lobby call is 9:45, you got to be there at 9:30, and if you're there at 9:31, you get in trouble.
Wow.
They're organized as hell. They're a well-oiled machine. Everything happens on clockwork. The dinner, the sound check, the meet and greet, the rehearsal. It's exactly when everything is happening. And I'm good with that. It's great, and they also they're like a family. They really take care of each other. When Billy, our bass player, lost his wife during the sound check in Tucson, he found out, immediately canceled the rest of the tour. Everyone, was crying with him and hugging him and checking on him in the coming weeks. They're good people. They really care about each other. It's not a kind of all about the money, show must go on kind of mentality, which other organizations might have, So those are two things, obviously they're all, we get along great. The music's incredible. The fans have been, I was the most nervous about that because I'm stepping in to big shoes to fill, 50 years of history in that band. They're going to scrutinize me and they might not like me. Everybody has, I would say 99.9% have embraced me with open arms, and I'm very grateful for that.
Did Spain dedicate it to Chick Corea?
Yeah. Well, he had passed that year when we recorded Spain, and it was a very spontaneous thing. We got invited to play last minute at Proxdog headlining when John Goodsall fell ill, and Rachel Flowers played right before us, and Alex Skolnick played right after us. And they were both my friends. I had history with them. I wanted to collaborate, and we had no time to rehearse. So we emailed. I'm like, what do you know? Let's do Spain because we all know it. And let's dedicate it to Chick Corea. So no rehearsal, get on stage, and magic. It was just one of those beautiful moments. Hey. And we captured it on film and audio.
You didn't rehearse it?
No. In fact, Alex and Rachel had never met. They just met on stage. And Alex borrowed my guitar.
That's cool.
So it was like lightning in the bottle kind of thing.
Phil Ehart, describe Phil to me.
Phil is sweetheart of a guy, Southern gentleman. He is the driving force behind Kansas. Without him, Kansas would probably not exist anymore, or maybe even ever get signed or known, because he was always ambitious and kind of pushing the band. Straight shooter, great leader, great manager, because he can stay calm in a storm, in a chaotic situation, and steer the ship, which you need in this business. So I learned I'm watching him and I'm learning how to be a leader in a band, because things happen even on any level, So those are a few things. And, he comes from a military family, so he's very, very, like, he doesn't drink. He's very straightforward. Yeah. The people in the crew call him Dad. He's like, he's kind of watching over everybody,
A band is a system, and you go into a band, you go, oh, these guys do this. Oh, cool. Okay. I can learn from this, or yeah.
Every band function, it has their own, it's a village, every band functions in their own way, and has their own mannerisms and traditions and routines, and you just you adjust, you go with it. This is a really, I feel fortunate to be in this group of people.
Did you have a favorite Kansas album? Do you have one?
Left Overture, I would say, probably, but I like Song for America because that's my favorite Kansas song, because of all the violin solos. It's my favorite one to play live. All their early stuff, and I really actually like The Absence of Presence, the last album they did, one of their strongest in a long, long time.
Great album.
We do some of the songs from that album, especially Throwing Mountains is really fun to play. I love the violin parts they created. So, those are a few I would say. I don't know if I have a hands down favorite.
Any prog albums that stand out from your past?
Okay. Definitely Close to the Edge by Yes. That's the first one that comes to mind. Would Mahavishnu count as a prog, or is that fusion?
Yeah. Well, they influence so much prog, right?
Birds of Fire or Visions of the Emerald Beyond, I would say. I'm actually a huge Spock's Beard fan. So I would say maybe V by Spock's Beard or Snow. Those two albums. Either of those.
Remember, make sure you comment on our videos, subscribe to our channel, and share our videos. If you want to make a donation, there's a PayPal link. Join our Patreon, get early access to our videos. I'm John Bowden. This is Rock History Book.